Hello, internet friends, and welcome to Keep the Game Moving. And this week, I've never actually been able to say this literally, but this week we're talking with someone who has literally written the book. We're talking with Karen Twelves, the author, among other things, among many wonderful things, great GM, all sorts of great things, but the author of a book that I really, really love, Improv for Gamers. Karen, thank you so much for joining us.
This book right
What?
here? What? For sale?
That was such organic product placement.
It was. Thank you.
It's almost, I think we have to mark advertising now on YouTube when we do this.
Probably.
So Karen, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Karen is a fixture in the Bay Area con GMing scene, runs fantastic games. And one of the things that I find interesting is that you run, like people like me run the same things, like I'm going to run Paranoia or I'm going to run Call of Cthulhu because, really I don't sort of pick systems to back up the story. Like the rules to me are secondary.
Right.
But you run such a diverse gamut of different systems.
Oh, thank you.
Which I find, you've got your Olive Garden game, which is powered by the Apocalypse.
It's just straight Apocalypse World. It was a setting, and I keep meaning to also just like put that out for free somewhere. But yeah, that was it. I continued to run that scenario for a couple of years because it was too funny not to.
Fantastic.
But yeah, and it was straight Apocalypse World, but you run an Olive Garden.
Right.
That's it. That's the game.
You run that. You run a bunch of GM-less games. You run you've run LARPs before. You're sort of like I said, you have a real diversity of systems that you run. And so I'm going to go off script here because this is the question that I'm thinking of. Do you pick the system to kind of drive the story, or let me rephrase this. Why did you choose Apocalypse World for that Olive Garden game?
That one, I think I was playing Apocalypse World like a lot at the time, like many of us were. That was the new hot sexy. It's still hot and sexy, I think it just occurred to me like it would be really funny to just play a game of where these characters who live very hard and serious lives, but like let's just make it very slapstick and see how they solve those types of problems with violence, like in a very Apocalypse World appropriate manner. And that seemed funny to me. It's interesting. I've never thought about like, why do I pick the games that I pick? Because I like running games that try to evoke a particular experience. And so I like games that do that work for me. So yeah, so with just kind of one-off games and games that aren't necessarily meant for campaigns, they're normally really trying to drive a particular feel. And so I like those, especially for conventions or, if I'm just going to do one night of a one shot with friends.
Right. And see, that's the interesting juxtaposition, I think, of choosing, I think consciously, this system will evoke this feeling versus, sort of my school, which is I want to here's 5 seconds of rules so we can just get to playing, and it's I think a lot of GMs make decisions somewhere on that spectrum, choosing what system to play. I mean, let's be honest, most GMs are just like, this is the system I know, so this is the system I'm going to run, and
that's why I go for a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse or Forged in the Dark games, because I know those systems really well. And you barely have to read the book. If you're like, I think, we were running a rotating campaign or rotating GMs of Monster of the Week, and only one person had ever read the book. So we were like, we've played Blades. This is like the same. It's fine. Right. We'll figure it out. The moves are right there.
Don't let the rules get in the way of the story you want to tell. That is right. That is always an important thing. So what was your introduction to GMing? How'd you get your start?
Oh, gosh. I should have thought about that in advance. My introduction to GMing.
It was on the piece of paper.
Damn it.
It's an open book test, Karen.
I know. I read parts of it.
I know you like for those of you at home. I do a run of show for every one of these, and only one other GM has even commented on it. And Karen like asked all these thoughtful questions about challenge some of my premises. It was yeoman work. All right, I'm done vamping. Answer the question.
This one. I mean, it might have been Olive Garden. That might have been one of the first ones because I think I was playing enough of that game and it was something that can kind of run itself. The playbooks have the moves have the rules right in them. All I needed was kind of a list of like, what are the hard moves that I should make to introduce new plot points, and then just let them all play in this ridiculous playground that I had built together. And I think that was one of the first games that I was running at conventions as one-shots as well.
It's interesting because that feels relatively recent to me. Maybe it isn't, maybe it was a while ago, but but I think of you as being like a seasoned kind of GM.
Oh God. I think Fiasco probably, if we're talking about like facilitating games, as opposed to having somebody else kind of run the table. Other GM-less games I probably started facilitating first, like Fiasco and Archipelago. Which were both fun.
That's a great point. I think there's a really interesting conversation about kind of, and this is a total misnomer, but GMing GM-less games. And I love the word you used, facilitating, because I think that's actually what you're really doing. Because, like you sit down at a Fiasco table, you're teaching the game. You've got, before the new version of Fiasco, which is fantastic and compact.
Oh, it's so good.
You and Sean and some others had like those little kits. It was like Fiasco bag. It was
we did, yeah. Jason and Steve had given us some, and then we made more.
Yeah,
we had a little Fiasco binder. I probably still have one somewhere.
And so it's interesting because I would often struggle with, I want to play Fiasco. Okay, great. Let me teach the game, and then it becomes, all right, you taught the game. What do we do? And how do you kind of more on the facilitate side, less on the I'm running this game side?
I mean, I think I just treat it the same way that you would teaching a board game. If nobody else has played that game before, you're going to walk everybody through the rounds and then remind them, okay, it's your turn, so you do this. So in Fiasco, it's like, okay, so it's your turn. So do you want to set the scene or end the scene? And they say, I'll set the scene. Cool. Where are you? What are you doing? And like kind of give those prompts, but really, I think in terms of like what you were saying, you don't want to lead them too directly. So you want to ask some very open questions. And and just thinking about running it the same way that you would a board game or any type of other tabletop game, that if people don't know the rules.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I think that's a good one, of sort of approaching it like you would approach teaching a board game, in almost a sort of a detached kind of, it's your turn. Here are the things you can do.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? For people who aren't familiar, Fiasco is this is gonna show the lack of my depth of knowledge in the area, but it was the first GM-less game I ever played. Is that true?
I think so.
Roach is GM-less, huh?
Is the Roach GM-less?
I think the Rope is GM-less.
God.
Yeah, so I played the Roach but Fiasco is, I can say this because I have no connection to the company. It is a near perfect role-playing experience. It is 3 hours of, at most, it's 3 hours of concentrated, just get right to the good stuff of a story. I can't say enough good things about it. I think all GMs should play Fiasco just to get a sense of the story beats and feel the ebb and flow and have that kind of sense of giving your story to somebody else and letting them make it even more awesome. I think it's great for that.
Yeah, so, it's a great game for just learning give and take.
Yeah.
And a balance of power over the narrative, because you don't get to tell all of your story. You have to give half of it up to somebody else. Yeah,
I think that, and as GMs, that's a super important aspect of it, because we should be giving a big chunk of the story to the players, and going where
Mhm.
they want to go, and they're doing the same for us. You know, it's just a
Right.
constant. The ball is always in the air, as to use that improv term. So, you know, you, like I said, you literally wrote the book, and I was lucky enough
Oh,
to
this
go.
book? Sorry, I was just going to make that joke again.
I'm all for a bit. I love bits. The incorporation is gold. But you also did workshops, and those
Yeah.
workshops that were really interesting were sort of a morning of improv exercises where, you know, you do these various exercises to kind of, that you would connect to very intentionally to parts of building a character, RPG
Yep.
stuff, that sort of thing. And then in the afternoon, you'd play Fiasco, or you'd play something else, and that would be kind of the lab where you'd take those exercises and get them on their
Yeah.
feet.
And
So
the
how did you come up
work
with the idea? How did you choose the games? How did you choose the exercises?
So the workshops came before the book. The book came out of that because people kept asking for my notes, and I kept saying these are horribly written. So then I wrote them better, and I wanted to do more than just talk about improv, because I think it's a great thing to talk about, but it's really hard to like grok it unless you do it. And so I wanted to run workshops that specifically talked about how we can apply these particular improv skills, just these relevant ones, to our hobby to make our hobby more fun, and to like enrich it. So it wasn't. So I was trying to just do a direct translation. So I started with working with Mia Blankensop, as she was coaching as well, and I was helping with her. And we were putting together, and Matt Klein as well. The three of us were kind of workshopping in the beginning because we all have various overlaps between gaming and improv. And so, yeah, we were trying to think about like, well, what are the skills that you need to like have a fun game? Listening. You need to like be comfortable with your scene ending, so you don't hog the limelight. As like a GM, you need to be comfortable rotating that spotlight around. There's work to be done in making characters, brainstorming characters together, coming up with interesting backstories and like motivations. There's just a lot also about like the very basics of like being excited about telling a story collaboratively and hearing other people's stories too. It's not just about you, you're all doing this together. And so it should be fun for everybody. I think what actually spurred me to finally get around to teaching the workshop, because I talked about it for a while, was I was just in a very bad game. And I was in a game where, three of the people on the table were trying to play one game and one guy was playing his own game. And I was just like, that's it. I'm done. I'm teaching this stupid workshop so I can teach people how to like actually collaborate, and be more invested together in the story as opposed to your character. And so, yeah, so we picked exercises that we thought would really help teach just like the basics of improv in terms of like how to just collaboratively tell a story together and be fun and excited about other people's contributions too. And being very flexible and adaptable when like things don't go your way, which happens all the time in gaming because there's dice and stuff. And then moving on to other more relevant for like GMing skills about how to just like keep a lot of balls up in the air, how to rotate the spotlight around so you're kind of keeping all the scenes interesting, so you know when to cut a scene, or I should say rather like when to edit a scene, because cut has just a different meaning in the LARPing world. And LARPing for like doing kind of more really full body characters when you want to, kind of live in a character for a while. So we were doing character workshops and other types of theater workshops for that too.
Right.
So
There's a
really
whole
all
other
came
world
out
of like, there's a whole other world of like physicality and stuff.
Yeah.
That honestly, you can, as a GM, you can bring that to a table, even sitting down. There's a lot
sure.
you can convey about characters using physical kind of, have a pose that a character always takes, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a ton that you can do from here to here. And we focused, on that, so it was both for like feeling your own character, being able to have NPCs that, were different from each other, because it's fun to have, NPCs that don't all sound like the same dude. And for LARPers to like really live in your character a little bit more, so you can find your character and be comfortable in that. So yeah, so we're really looking at the practical skills and what exercises that we all knew from our experiences in improv that helped highlight those. So we put all that together and started teaching it. And yeah, originally it was like a full day thing. We would teach like 3 hours, 4 hours of improv, which is a lot.
It was a lot. As a member of the workshop, but it was fun. I mean, it was great.
And I mean, and that was also like what I was coming from in terms of like when I would go take an improv class, it's a couple of hours. It would be a thing. And then it's only been in the last couple of years that I was like, no, I need to run this in a 2-hour con slot. Like, I can't do this anymore. But before we were doing it at conventions, we were running it at Endgame at our friendly local Oakland gaming store. Miss it.
Gone, but not forgotten.
No. And we would do a couple of hours of improv and then have lunch and then come back and play a game for 2 hours or so. We would have time set aside. And I think we started with playing Fiasco, and then we brought in Archipelago just to switch it up, because it's another very quick and easy GM-less game that's very based on improv decision making. So that worked really well. And then we kind of transitioned out of doing all day events to just running it at conventions. So then it got shorter and shorter because we didn't need the extra bit. So I would just always try to get a morning slot to teach it towards the start of the con, so then people could kind of think about it for the rest of their weekend.
Yeah, because Gen Con's not going to give you 8 hours. That's not how Gen Con. That's not. They're not that generous.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't say enough. I think the workshops, which honestly you still do, everyone.
Oh yeah, I still do them, and we actually did one online last fall. But
neat.
Online has just been hard for me. So yeah. I had been really excited about doing more, and then did not.
Yeah.
So it'll come back at conventions. Online teaching is something I have been teaching improv online off and on, since last March. But I don't know if it's something that I really want to continue a lot. We'll see how it goes.
It's so hard to have that listening connection and like the beats, I've found it like running games online, because I run, I run a Twitch game, and then I have my home game that I'm playing. And, there's even in the Twitch game, people have been playing together for years who are like seasoned, performers. There's still like, no, you, what, that just doesn't happen at the table. And it's, it's an interesting, I think there's been a real bloom in people running games online.
And I mean, that wasn't new. People were running games and streaming, for years prior to this, but more people moved to that platform who weren't used to it. Mm-hmm. And I've never done well streaming games. It has not been something that I've really like sought out to do. Because I get so easily distracted by all the other things on my screen. Even if I try to eliminate every other single tab, I will tune out. I just can't. I cannot stay focused playing a game online as much as I can at the table, which sucks because I have not been playing as many games this past year.
No, if I'm not GMing, I'm 100% the same way. If I'm GMing, then I'm more for whatever reason. Probably, I just prefer to GM in general. But if I'm playing, I'm the same way. I'm zoning out. It's even easier now to look at your phone than it is at con games, when there's always that one player who's pulling out their phone and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, I mean at con games I would have the decency to like turn my phone upside down, but I'm at my home. My phone is right there. It's right there.
candy aren't going to crush themselves.
They won't.
So, we've talked a little bit about, about story games that are, which let's call them GM-less games, because I think, hopefully all games are story games. Like that is.
Yeah, that should be the idea. I don't want the hashtag story game scene to come for me on what is and isn't a story game, but
yeah, that's right.
All of them should be telling a story.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there are fulsome discussions online about what is and isn't a story game, and I'm rabidly uninterested in those conversations. But
I do not need to get into a forum.
Yeah,
ever.
Ever. But like, there are. We talked about GM-less games. We talked about like more narrative games, and what are some principles from those games that are kind of universal?
I think you should just be excited to be there and excited to hear other people's stories and find a way to make them all work together. So if you're only excited for your own story, you're probably going to be disappointed because it's not only going to be your story a fraction of the time, So you have to just show up excited to be invested in other people's stories too.
I think that's a super important point. One of my horrible RPG hot takes is that's why I hate backstory. Like, I'm always a little leery of the person who says, like, I have this 97-page story about what my character's done, because all of that happened away from the other people and has nothing to do with them. And it's going to be that person trying to get their stuff in, and railroading, as my father died when I was, that sort of thing. And
that's why having like a session 0 is so good. So you can tell the backstories together. And then it's even more satisfying when other people remember your backstory and bring it in, in the same way, like you can feel like like a good friend, remembering other people's backstories too.
I actually love to use the old Spirit of the Century shtick of, like, in session 0, I'll just do it as mechanically as saying, like, Karen, you and Jim did an adventure together. What was that? What give me the sense of that adventure? Because it builds that history without having sort of the baggage of backstory.
Yeah, and there's so many games that build that in to your Karagen, like Apocalypse World, like Blades, all of the derivatives of those, Monster Hearts' strings, they all have those really cool things that give you reasons to care about the other characters, and the backstory will come out of that. And then I remember, there's like, you can draw the relationship map in Smallville, which was a fun thing to do.
I never played that, but people told me it was great.
I only played it a couple of times and it was fun. I remember playing one that was kind of like pretty straight, like teenagers who suddenly had meteor powers, and that was exciting. And then I was in one that was reskinned for Dune, and it was hilarious because we just threw the cannon out the window because we're like, right, remember when Paul fights Janice? Fights that guy. Guy. Remember when Paul fights that guy?
I sure do.
That guy? What if that guy killed Paul and this nobody gets like all of the spooky sand powers, and you just continue from there? And so we played all of those characters, and Paul was dead, and it mostly turned into just a huge political bickering, and then eventually, like, we realized we were under attack from outside forces, and so then we were just bickering like behind rocks as we were kind of firing, and then we just go back to character infighting. It was so fun.
Rocks was another name for this podcast. It's going to be right up there. I think this is a story for another day, but like the Smallville thing, I'm just leery of licensed properties in RPGs. Although now that I say that, like, I hear the Leverage RPG is fantastic, and all, so it seems like all of these licensed properties are actually surprisingly good. But I'll never know. I don't know. It's not. So what are some, like, because when I think of, I'm thinking of LARPs, and one of the challenges for me with LARPs is that the most important resource in a LARP is GM time. And I always find I struggle with kind of not wanting to do too much, but then like this other guy is getting all his stuff in, and so I know that most LARPs use multiple GMs to kind of balance that out some. But I think it also, I bring that to the table where I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm aware of how much camera time each character is getting, and try and even it out as much as possible.
Yeah.
What are some things that, like, you've played a lot of story games, you've run some LARPs, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are some principles that kind of you bring that you found that are kind of universal for GMing there?
Well, I should say my LARP background, just to clarify, I have never been to like a weekend away boffer LARP. That is a whole world that I have not entered, and it looks fantastic and amazing. I just have not had a chance to experience that.
Right.
So the LARPs that I play,
LARPs,
con LARPs, house LARPs, just one-off games. That can be an hour, that can be 6 hours.
You're in my top 5 ghost judges, by the way.
Oh, for Ghost Court?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've played a variety of games that, like Ghost Court, is almost a party game, but you're kind of holding into a character for a little while, to ones that, I actually am putting in time for a costume. And it's much more immersive, with a lot of work going into the props and sets. So my experience with like the GMs in that is that in those games, they tend to hang back, because there's not a lot of mechanics for conflict resolution. And if it is, it's things like Rochambeau, and you don't necessarily need somebody to be there. So I've only been to a couple that kind of felt on the edge of, I needed to have a GM present to like help walk me through things like combat and stuff. But otherwise, it was just like, well, you're in a room and here's your character. Go nuts.
Go talk to people.
Yeah, go talk to people. Go act. I mean, for 6 hours.
Honestly, that is not a bad, like, I've done that at the table where I'm just like, I hand out the characters, then I'm like, go
role play.
Go
do your thing.
I'll be over here. That's, I mean, we all say like that is the GM's dream of, I can walk away from the table and they're all bickering in character. That's the.
Yeah. And the few times that I've facilitated LARPs, I think the first LARP I ever facilitated was Tribunal, which the GM isn't even there. They're not in the room.
Yeah.
I was on the other side of a curtain listening. And the only reason why I ever came in and interacted was because I was following Jason Morningstar's like slightly more Americanized version of GMing it. Because I think the original one is that the facilitator just leaves and comes back like an hour later. So, but I was like, maybe I should just like hang around and listen just to see if anyone needs anything.
That was, I played, I don't know if it was that one, but I played a version of Tribunal that you ran at a Big Bad Con. And that was an experience, man. That was,
we came in as characters every once in a while to stir shit up a little bit, but that wasn't part of the original rules. I was taking a page from when I first played it. Jason Morningstar was running it, and that's something that he did. And I was like, that seems pretty cool and a good way to just like pick things back up a little bit more and pulling people out and messing with their heads and,
Yeah, the pulling out that was a really interesting, and it actually, because I look at everything and I'm like, ooh, what can I steal for GMing? And I think that pulling people out and using some isolation and using some like secret information and things like that can be a really powerful tool to kind of bring interesting things to the front, depending on what kind of game you're playing. You always want to be conscious, to your point, like you said, of 3 people playing one game, one person playing a very different game.
Yeah.
that aspect of it. But you can do some really interesting stuff with that kind of, I'm going to bring people out and give them something that and then everyone's like, what does he know?
I think it can be fun to a certain extent to have an unequal distribution of player knowledge. But most of the time I find it's fine if the characters don't know anything, but all the players are in on it. But if you are doing something that's a little bit more immersive, it's kind of fun. But I wouldn't want to rely on it. Also, because then I'd feel like I was spending too much time doing one-on-one stuff that other people couldn't even watch to enjoy. But doing some little secrety stuff is fun. It's all fun. You're like, ooh, secrets. But because you want to immediately find them out. So like, as long as you very soon at some point in the game reveal the juicy secrets, then like have as much fun as you want. But if you only like tell the secrets later, then it's like,
right.
Okay.
If it becomes a debrief thing where, well, guess what I knew, that's less fun. Yeah,
it's less fun if it could have been played out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've certainly played games that were kind of like whodunits, and you find out like, you two are working together the whole time, and that's very exciting. But it also would have been exciting to discover it as a character.
Right. I think to me, the takeaway there is, if you're going to use kind of those narrative tools, make sure that it's kind of pushing the story forward for everybody, not just for one person. That's the trick there.
I facilitated in the Monster of the Week game that we were playing, the game that I picked up. We had just finished a kind of a combat scene that went very poorly for another character, and he had failed very, very badly. And so I was like, well, we pick up with you're in a coma, and I played the whole game. I kind of borrowed bits and pieces, one from this one episode of Magicians I really liked, from that one episode of Star Trek with the bubble, with Crusher and Picard, and the book Passage by Connie Willis. And I stole all my favorite things from those three things and put together a story of where he was, and all the characters were in his mind trying to kind of solve mysteries. But he slowly figured out as a player too, that this was all happening in his head. And I had kind of told the other players, like, I'm going to give you some instructions. And your instructions are like, you are not you. You are an interdimensional creature that is trapped in this guy's head, that is trying to impersonate his friends and his memories to convince him to get you out. So here is your objective. And if at any point you want to kill off this person that you're pretending to be, do it. So, because we were kind of playing a horror angle of it. So like his friends kept dying. And I had assured everybody, I was like, I'm not going to do anything that can't be undone. So like, and we all know each other, really trust each other. And I made sure to say that very clearly. It's like, this is going to be gimmicky and you're going to figure it out. So don't freak out if things happen and you're like that, you broke the game because I was killing off characters. But it was really fun.
I mean, steal. Like if you're GMing, steal ideas from wherever you can. Like if a book does something cool, if a TV show does something cool, just file that away. Because actually, I think one of the things that I have stolen from the most is I will buy modules for games I'm never going to play, and I'll just read them because how did they do this scene? Oh, that's a scene they did that was really cool, or something like that. Just to see things. And con games are great for that. And systems, playing systems you don't know is great for that. Just to like say, like, oh, I want to steal that part of this. I like that a lot. Like there was I still remember the first time I played Primetime Adventures, and I was like, fan mail. Like it was, and all of a sudden, every game I did was, like, you can reward your fellow players for doing something awesome. And now, that's a mechanic that everybody loves because it's great. And we should all steal it. We should all use it.
Yeah.
But the thing you said about, everybody at the table trusted you and you were doing this gimmicky thing. And I
told them at the top that it was gimmicky. Like I wanted, because I didn't want anyone to be upset. And I wanted the other players to be cool with me telling them, you're not actually playing your character. Here is your agenda. Like, I want you to play this agenda to tell this particular story. Because we were also really playing it like a TV show and trying to make every episode very episodic. So we were really trying to get into a theme. And it just, they're players that I've known for years, and I love them, and we all are like very comfortable with each other. So I knew that I could kind of ask them to play a kind of railroady game, and they'd be down for that. And they would be down with the secrets about it. And everyone kind of figured it out at the end. But yeah, there was a lot of note passing.
I think that's part of the trick there is the whole, if you're going to do a gimmicky game, just be upfront and say, this is a gimmicky game. You're going to figure it out. And when you do, don't spoil it for other people. Play along. I ran this was a total side quest for my long-running Call of Cthulhu game. And, we sort of had this joke that, like, anytime they were on any mode of transport, something awful happened, which put a lot of pressure on me, because every time they took a boat trip or I had to figure out something awful that would happen. And so I did a Groundhog Day thing, which I'd never done in gaming before. And the weird part was that some of them were aware, like some of for super arcane reasons that had to do with like long-standing character things. 2 people lived out of time, blah, blah, blah. But like, so they didn't Groundhog Day and everybody else did. And, or they knew they were Groundhog Daying. And, to tell the players like, okay, now you don't remember yesterday, and like, as the GM, I had to be like, okay, 4 things that happen every day that are, like, you have those beats, but that was a case of like, it's going to be gimmicky, but just go along with it. It'll get where it's going, and, it'll be fun. But that's something where you really have to be, there's communication between GM and player that's super important there.
Mm-hmm. We played one of those too. I think another one of our Monster of the Week games, time kept resetting. And depending on how well we rolled, not everyone would remember every time. So sometimes it was a different person who was like, last time you told me that this was repeating and now you don't remember. So what's going on? So yeah, it's really fun if you can just buy into whatever the game is or, the gimmick is. And so buy-in is just a super important thing across the board. And that's a big thing that I talk a lot in Improv for Gamers is it's just really important that everybody is there to do the same thing. And so we just really need to establish at the top what that thing is. And the more that we can get everybody involved in that decision, the more everyone's going to be invested in making it happen.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned it, and I think it's worth it. We've talked about it before on the show, but session 0 is critical. Like, if you're going to be running any sort of campaign with people, having that one game where, it can be part of character creation. That's totally cool. You can have that, but that session to say like, I want to play a deductive game. What do you, and like, I want to do this. Well, I want to do that. And either as GM saying, okay, I'm going to weave all of those together, or saying, well, how does, I want the gunfight in the lobby of the Matrix to go with your political scheming, and making sure that people know there's going to be a give and a take there. And sometimes we're going to be doing more this, sometimes more that. The other thing that I think is super important about session 0, and that I know is also very near and dear to your heart is safety tools at the table, and making sure that everybody feels safe and feels like they are welcome at the table. Because it's that can be a real challenge especially when you don't know the players.
Yes. And that's, again, like another part of buy-in is we all have to be on the same page about what type of content and like what maturity level of the game is. Like I wouldn't dump people into a con game where I start killing off their characters at the start unless I was very specific about that and just upfront told them, like, I don't need the element of surprise. We can still have fun with it. I don't like trying to surprise my players with something edgy. I don't like that philosophy. I know some GMs really enjoy it, and I don't. Mm-hmm. So we can just, we can both die mad about it.
There's a veil for you. And
Yeah.
when I think about safety tools, now there's like a suite now of different safety
Yeah.
tools, and good cons like say Big Bad Con will specifically ask GMs what safety tools are you going to use, and what is going to be there, and I really think GMs should learn various safety tools because it's super easy to just say, well, I have an open door policy. If you don't like this game, you can leave. That's like, I don't want to be pejorative. That's not a great, as on the list of safety tools, that is one of the less effective ones. That is kind of a like, that's very much an imperial decision making kind of thing. And there are other safety tools like veils or that sort of thing that allow you to say, okay, I know you don't like spiders, so we're gonna like not involve spiders, that sort of thing.
I remember a Dead of Winter game where Dwayne was like, this game involves teeth. If anyone has a problem, you're not gonna want this game. This is a horror game with teeth. I was like, thank you for that. I will calibrate myself accordingly. And if, I was like, if I feel like I'm gonna get to a part where I get too squicked out, because like, who doesn't have dreams about teeth? Like, knowing that up front helped me prepare for it. It was like, I'm not going to just bail on this because I like really want to play this game, but now I know, and I'll just kind of be responsible for myself and feel like, do I need to tap out? And having the tools to communicate that. So when you do get in a moment where you're like, oh shit, this is a horror game and there's all types of teeth body horror that I was not anticipating, and I'm panicking and I'm feeling sick and I don't know what to do. You're like, oh wait, there's a card with an X on it. I'll just hold that up and done. It's so easy.
Yeah.
Like, and I can just say no more teeth. And
enough with the teeth.
Yeah, and the GM will be like, cool. So it's, you don't necessarily, it's not like you need them, but like, it's so easy to just have a thing that you can point to, or, if you can just do this, you're like, no more, I'm done. I don't like where this is going. And people just know what that symbol means. They're like, oh, that symbol means back the fuck off of that storyline. Cool, we'll just go a different route.
Yep.
So being easygoing with that give and take and that adaptability is a huge thing also that I stress in improv for gamers stuff, is like, you just need to be okay letting your idea go. And, there's that saying of, the player's more important than the game. And if there's ever any point where you're making a decision about what's good for the story and what's good for the player, pick the person every time.
Well, there you go. If you take nothing else away from this episode, take that sentence away. The player's more important than the game. That is huge, and I think it's very true. And also, the GM is a player, and the GM is more important than the game. And so, as a player, you also want to be conscious of making sure that, oh, this GM wants to play this kind of game. Okay, let's give them what they're looking for as well.
Yeah, like if I'm sitting down at a con game, I have an understanding that GM has put in a lot more planning than maybe we've done in our home games. And they want to tell a particular story, and I want to be there to play in that story. And there are some GMs that, might play a little bit more railroady, but I go in there and I know that, and I'm like, I love the games that they run. So I know I'm going to have a good time and I'm going to play the part. And like, yes, let's get on that train. It'll be so much fun.
Yeah, if the trains go in a good place, railroads are fine. That's the trick. I love trains. Who
doesn't love trains?
I've always been a fan. And then I played Orient Express. Now I like them less. That is so. We've been talking about story games, and there has been, in the past, I don't know, decade, there's just been an explosion of indie games.
Yeah.
Some of varying sizes. There are indie games that are like fully produced and that's like, and then there are indie games that are, on a postcard and there are really good versions of that. But you honestly, you are the reason that I know about I'm not going to call it itch.io, even though that's what I thought it was because I'm old.
That's how I it could be. I have always said itch.io or itch.io, but we could all be wrong.
that was also another name for this podcast. We could all just be but itch.io
Itch. Let's just call it Itch. We got the first part.
My buddy Itch. Itch has really, I think, been at the forefront of like it's a way for people to get games out there sort of in a quick and dirty manner.
Right.
That just there are like, I don't even know how you know the games that are on there. It's like you
there's so many. I mean, I don't know either.
Right.
And I back a few friends on Patreon, and they put out games sometimes monthly, sometimes every once in a blue moon.
We're gonna have a one of those Patreon creators is going to be on the show soon. Jian Shim is going to be talking about the stuff she does.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Jian's making amazing. She's making really fantastic, interesting stuff.
She's mailing people sticks.
Yep. And all of those games, I think it's fantastic because so many people feel so limited of like, oh, I can't make a game because I'm never going to be able to sell it to, the top 3 publishers. And it's like, surprise, there's tons of little ones. And also you could just put it out on the internet. Like, you're never going to make money off of it anyways. Even if it did go to the big publishers, so like, don't worry about that. That's not why we're doing this.
Yeah, right. It's just neat to see people doing something with your creation. The other thing is, how many of those games have a kind of almost meta narrative component where it's like report back on your game? Like an aspect of the game is literally telling the community how the game went, or sort of thinking about how the game went, and that can alter how people perceive the game. There's like I really wish there were some sort of, and maybe there is, and I just don't know it, some sort of curation or like way to find things, because it's hard to separate. And again, this is a value statement, and I don't love it, but the wheat from the chaff kind of there. And I guess it's
it's like there's so much out there. It's hard to know where to start and how to find what you want. I don't really know. Again, I just kind of go based on what other people are talking about in the moment, and maybe I'll go check it out.
Yeah, I wait for people smarter than me and cooler than me to be like, "Have you played this?" But again, I'll say cons are a great way to do that. And GMs, when you go to cons, play at least one system you've never heard of before, because the way you become, and play with at least one GM you've never played with before, which I know can be, that's always challenging because you're like, I don't know how this guy's going to be, how this person's going to be. But that's how you get better, is by seeing how different people do things differently than you.
I would also advise, if you're not finding anything that looks interesting on the schedule, because it's just like a lot of Pathfinder, is find if they have a games on demand, because that's where you will find a lot of the smaller press games and a lot of the weirder stuff, and a lot of people kind of running their own things. And so there's a lot of cool different games there, but it does kind of then turn into its like own little con within a con, because it's not on the main schedule. But I don't know.
No, it's a great point. I think that that is a way to, in a small period of time, try a bunch of different things, so that can be, and I mean, look, if Jason Morningstar is sitting at a table with a pile of index cards looking at you asking if you want to play a game, the answer is yes. You want to play it. Like, you will not regret that. And that's true, games on demand, I've found weirdly, I don't know, but I have found that like a lot, the GM quality of games on demand is usually above average.
You'll find a lot more things that fall into story game style or GM-less, or things that don't use dice at all. It's a good place for people to kind of like workshop their games that they're trying out. Although a lot of times, I think, depending on who's running it, sometimes they say like, you have to run at least one game that you didn't write. So it's not just people bringing their own stuff.
Right.
But you can bring your own stuff, but they encourage you, like, if you're going to run multiple games, like, try other people's games too. And so, and that has been, you know, where I've GM'd at cons, except for Big Bad Con and other very smaller ones that basically I didn't have to go through a very difficult system to submit a game.
So how is GMing for that different, or what has GMing for games on demand? What is that sort of? How's that changed your GMing style?
I don't know. I mean, I think it made me really respect, like any con game, the time. You know, people have other things to go to, so you can't run late. And you know, but they might be late getting to you, so like you just have to accept that. And yeah, and it is going to be people that you don't know, unless it's, you know, a particularly small crowd, because you do end up seeing a lot of the same people at Games on Demand. But it is also like any con game; it's really up in the air about who might sign up for your game, and you're not going to have anything to do about that.
Right. You might have 3 players. You might have 6 players.
You might have 0 players.
You might have, yeah.
Which has also happened, and sometimes that happens, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm free for 4 hours.
Got a break.
You know, maybe I'll jump into a game.
Right.
Because that's another thing, is that they really, the people that host Games on Demand really want you to get into a game for that time slot. Like, they don't want to turn people away, so they will try to make something work. So I've also been like a reserve GM, you know, with my Fiasco binder back in the day, like ready to run something if we had overflow. So at least people could play a game that, you know,
I think one interesting aspect of Games on Demand, at least the times that I've done it, has been the sales pitch kind of thing. Where so for people who don't know, Games on Demand, the players show up and they are in a, what is it, mostly a 2-hour block?
Often? It's like 2 or 4, but I think 2 is getting more popular.
Yeah, they show up for and that, you know, you're going to have them for that block of time. And then if they have 5 tables, 5 GMs will stand up and do 30 seconds on what game they're playing. You know, here's the game I'm running. Here's why, you know, and
well, in a lot of the bigger cons, they just have a table now with summaries of each game. So you kind of go up and you just read, you know, the 300 character really, like, pitch of it. You know, you read the very short pitch, and the host will try to not sell you, but like let you know a little bit about every game too. So like they're required to know a lot, because people will ask them questions, because the GMs won't necessarily be there, you know, an hour before their game starts. But yeah, people will show up, and then a lot of times what they do now is I think they do boarding calls, where you get a random card and then they'll call different letters and you go to the one on your card. And so it kind of helps randomize that groups go up in groups, and then you just say, I want in that game. And then if that game is full, then you're like, I want this one.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, I honestly would prefer that to because, you know, the sales pitch thing is tough when, you know, one person is like, I'm running a deeply personal, emotional game about this small Victorian family, and the next person's like, hey, let's shoot things and blow stuff up and woohoo! Yeah. You know, it's
I've done those. Yeah, because at Go Play Northwest, if you ran games in the donut, everybody would do a pitch. And some of them would be like, this is a deeply personal game, and this is based on stories of my own life, and the other person is like, robots!
Right. Yeah, that, you know, it's tough to compete with that. That's the thing. So what have through the, you know, you've run games, you've played games, you've been gaming for a huge chunk of your life. What have you found?
Edit them too.
That's right, edit. Yeah, you're man. I so appreciate a well and cleanly edited game. It makes such a difference. I mean, not even just like continuity wise, because, you know, you find games that have continuity errors, but just like things like good punctuation and, you know, spelling and that sort of thing that are more important than maybe I thought they would be to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just clarity. And that's, I know, you know, just from my own living in and being in the communications world, like clarity is a big part of an editor's job. Like reading things for clarity and then editing for clarity. So since you brought it up, like what is the, what does an editor bring to a published RPG work?
I mean, you want somebody to be able to pick it up and run it and play it, just like, and I mean, and I edit for both RPGs and board and card games, which have a real word economy. So you really need to like explain how to play this in as few words as possible because you have this much on your pamphlet. You want the person to be able to understand the rules, because setting is great, and some people can write very flowery setting, and it can be really fun to read, and then you step away and you're like, but I don't understand when I rolled the dice. So as the editor, you have to go, you read it and you're like, you kind of read it assuming, pretending you know nothing. You never played a game before, you don't know what any of this is. You have no idea how it works. You're a little intimidated by the whole thing. So you want something that is as approachable and easy to understand as possible, yet still carries the designer's tone and voice, so it's on theme. So when I'm editing for Evil Hat, they want a very conversational style for their games. So there's lots of contractions and it's very cutesy, and sometimes there's little puns here and there. But then, if I edited, just because I edit for, individuals and also for other companies, I was editing somebody's just like very interesting kind of seance-y LARP. And there were no contractions. It was very gothic. It was very serious, but we were still trying to explain safety tools, so it's like, how do you still state things very plainly, but like keep a certain elevation of like flowery language? So there's a lot going on as an editor in just like, how can I get the point across from this game while keeping it like on brand?
I mean, I think that's endlessly fascinating to try. Essentially, you're synthesizing somebody's voice and trying to make the voice make sense, both, sort of in a continuity way, but also just in a readability way. And those two things can often be at loggerheads. Yeah. Because we've all written that first draft and then the next day gone and read it and been like, whoa.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. In this book.
I find the editing part of that, I think is really fascinating. And I mean, it also is interesting because you bring because you are so versed in improv and in these safety tools and that sort of thing, you bring kind of a lens to your editing of the piece that, I think is how do I want to phrase this? I guess, have you found, I'll ask it as a question. Have you found that those lenses actually add to the edit, or do they kind of get away?
Because I'll try to read things and be like, how could this go wrong? How could someone misunderstand this? And could this potentially lead to unfun gameplay? So, and I mean, I draw on my own experiences of games having gone wrong. And so sometimes I can see things and be like, I just see how someone could misunderstand that sentence. And that would be a shame. So let's figure out how to phrase that in a different way. Cause that seems too vague. Or you just want to make sure that things are clear enough. I hate learning board games. Hate it. I have to learn just by like playing through a round. I cannot read the rules. They mean nothing to me. Worse yet, if someone tries to read them to me, I will fall asleep. So me reading and editing for like card game and board game rules is be like, can I learn this? Would I be able to read this and learn this game? Because I hate doing that. Hate trying to teach myself a new game. I don't have the patience for it. So, because I just have to follow through all the steps and actually play it out. That's just the type of learner that I am. And so I think about that too, of like, for people that are not going to be able to just like read this and then set it down and then go do the thing, like, how can we make this, as digestible as possible?
So what are like the best GM tips that you have been kind of, I don't know, I say given, but we don't really, for the most part, we don't go away. Like GMs don't, well, all right. So we do sit around at like 2 a.m. after we've run games and talk gaming and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of GM tips, but there's no like, here's what you should do. Like, but like, what are things that you've picked up that are sort of you file away as things GMs should do?
Always have backup plans for if they go through your plan too fast. I've been caught without a backup plan, and that was terrifying. Yeah, make sure that you actually understand the game, because there are some games that you can just wing, and there are some that you cannot. I unfortunately ran a horrible Dread game at, I don't recall what con now. Maybe it was Gen Con. And I had played Dread, and I thought it was simple enough. And then a person sat down and gleefully exclaimed that she was a like Jenga world champion. And Dread, you play with a Jenga tower, and that's kind of, it builds up the tension because the tower gets really wobbly. This tower was solid. It was solid the whole way through. It never fell, and I did not know what to do. I was not prepared enough to figure out how to make this game feel scary without the tower. And so, yeah, that made me realize, like, I can't wing it. Not with that game. So there are certain games that I'm comfortable, like I can figure it out. That one I was like, I really should have maybe tested this a few more times at home. I played it once with my friends who were all very nice and sweet to me. And so they played it very, very kindly to me as a GM.
They're knocking the tower over on purpose.
Yeah, right. The fools, they were too nice to me. But like, just in terms of good gameplay, things that I've thought about is like, not everybody needs the same amount of screen time to feel as equally invested. But there are limits. Like, you should just keep it moving. So like, it's okay if you stay. Yeah, like if you're going and just channel surfing or on the radio, it's fine to like stay on one channel more than another, but keep moving. And again, this just comes out of experiences that I've had that I did not enjoy, sitting for 30 minutes while there was like a scene going on with one character, and then 30 minutes the scene going on with another character, and then we were 3 hours in to a game, and I was like, seriously?
Yeah. And then the guy said, let's take a break.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also, be really, really try to normalize safety tools as much as possible, in terms of just like, because it can be very uncomfortable to speak up, even if it's something really small, like I need to take a break, or, hey, I actually have to go. Like, I have a hard stop time. That can be really hard to say. So just trying to really foster that environment of like, it's really okay to speak up with any needs that you have.
And that's a tone the GM has to set. That's something you set at the beginning of the session, where you set the like, I am notorious about not taking anything seriously, but I tell people I don't joke about the X card. That's the one thing that I don't joke about. That is 100% serious, because it's there for everybody, and it's there to make sure everybody has fun, and I think setting a tone of like, if you have to do something, do what you got to do,
And you got to model it yourself. You can't just write the X on the card, be like, that's the X card. You have to, like, if people aren't familiar with it, you need to kind of walk it through and then model it, and then actually model it in game. Like, find a reason to X something out
Yeah.
That's super small and trivial, just to show that you can do it for something small and trivial too.
That's a great tip, actually. And nobody, I've never heard that said that way, and it's so true. Just like, if the GM uses the X card, it just breaks the ice.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to model the rules and bring them back and come back to them and show that it's not a scary thing and it's not like a single pull parachute for extreme emergencies only. It's a way to just calibrate whatever your content is in the game. And some games are going to need it more than others. If you're playing Bluebeard's Bride and you're playing like a terrifying body horror, game of it, you're going to need some way to say, like, this is squicking me out right now. Like, I need a breather. This is, not what I thought I was doing. If you're playing a pulp action game, you might just want a way to say, like, I actually didn't want to do that. I wanted to jump from that chandelier instead. Right. I would prefer to do that.
And I mean, have multiple tools in your toolkit, and don't be afraid to use multiple tools. We've talked about veils, we've talked about open door, we talked about the X card. There are a bunch of different ones, and you can find like online, you can find little printed kits that are like, here's all the stuff. I believe product placement.
I don't have those ones around. But now I feel bad because I don't have the link for that. But yeah, Dale
right?
No, Dale Horseman and I put out our own set of calibration cards that had come out of us putting together a thing for Big Bad Con, because they wanted kind of a one-page flyer. And then we decided, let's do more. And Dale was like, these would look really good on like big playing cards or like tarot-sized cards. And we're like, yeah, let's make a bunch. Set.
Gosh, where do I?
It's on Drive-Thru RPG, and we didn't make a big deal about it. We just kind of put it out there, and it's really, really cheap. And we make like maybe 30 cents off every sale, and then we donate it whenever we actually make enough to pay out, which has only happened once so far. So like, we weren't in it in the money because they're not our tools. We just collected and we contacted all these people and said we'd like to just include it in a deck. And there's a lot of roundups like that. There's some other pages that break it all down, but we wanted something because a lot of them, like the X card or like script change, are really helpful. It's physical cards, so we
having that visual is really useful. And the cards have little explanations on them, so you can like see like, here's what this means exactly. You can read on the. I think they are. They're any tool like that is a useful thing for a GM to have. Those are just good things to have in your toolkit. So, well, all right. So we're getting towards it. You've been very kind with your time, but what are some of your favorite systems to run and why?
Oh gosh, what are some of my favorite systems to run? I mean, I like Apocalypse World games, and I like Forged in the Dark games just because I'm so familiar with them, and I find them really easy to run without having to read all the rules.
Right. No, you can run a great Powered by the Apocalypse game really quickly. You can be up and running very quickly, which I think is great. Morgan Nuncio was on, and she has like a spreadsheet of every Powered by the Apocalypse. It's really funny. She has like,
oh my gosh.
But like, do you have a favorite flavor of the Baskin and Robbins Apocalypse World Powered by the Apocalypse games?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I love the classics. I like the classic Apocalypse World. I like Monster Hearts. And then, things kind of offshoots of that. I like Blades, and the games that have come out of that, like Band of Blades is a really cool game. But I also like games that just, for me, are minimal prep, because again, I don't like learning all the rules. So I love the one-page games that are like, here it is. This is it. And it really just lays the whole thing out. And you're telling a little tiny story in 2 hours. So if I'm GMing, I prefer those types of games. I love playing complicated campaign games. I was in an amazing Pathfinder campaign game for a bunch of years, but I wasn't running it, so it was great.
Right.
I didn't have to do the math, and somebody else had my character sheet in that app. It was great.
You can just click the button and see if you hit or not.
Hero Labs. We had it in Hero. Yeah,
Oh,
the
okay.
thing. I didn't even have to do the math when I leveled my character. I was like, click, click, done. So yeah, so I like games that I don't have to do a ton of prep for, and that will walk me through a particular type of story, because I like playing one-offs and just kind of experiencing that particular flavor.
Mm. What's a system you haven't run that you would love to?
I think when I saw this question, I looked at the shelf of games and was like, what haven't I run that I would love, like, or what have I not played that I would love? I don't know. GMing is not like, I would just as easily be a player than GM. So I'm not like super pressed to run a game.
That's a really interesting dichotomy. How many people are sort of, I don't want to say forced, but how many people are sort of thrust into the GM role because nobody else wants to do it, versus the people like, I want to be the GM, I want to be the storyteller. There's a really interesting, I think, there's not a lot of people in the middle of that fence, and it's you're kind of there, but there's, most people are like, I'm the GM because nobody else would do it, or I'm the GM because it's always my turn. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
now I'm like leaning over trying to look. I don't know. And there's so many games that I have that I played once and I haven't had the opportunity to play again. Like I would love to play BFF again, which is GM-less.
Yeah.
But I've only ever played it when somebody else was, facilitating it. And now I have this lovely box set in my hot little hands and have not been able to crack it open with anybody, which is a bummer. Someday. And like Wolfspell is another game that I got to play a lot of, but I've never run myself. And it's such a cool
I'm not
game.
familiar with Wolfspell. Give me the elevator.
What? Hang on. I'm gonna go get it. Because you got to see it.
This is the second time someone has walked off in this podcast. This is very exciting. I'm always, if this were a real kind of actually edited piece, we'd have like an interstitial now, but instead.
No. So this is Wolfspell.
Wow.
It's the size of like an LP.
Yeah.
This is Epi's game, and it's amazing. And you are people, and you turn into wolves, and you go on an adventure. And at the end, maybe you will be a person or not, depending on how it works out for you. So it was an amazing game. And now, it's like printed on like a record thing, but it's not.
Okay, I was going to ask. Yeah. So it's almost more a GM screen than it is a book, kind of.
It really is a perfect GM screen, because you just it walks you through, and that was a game that I got to play a bit and was really fun, but I haven't run it myself. So I have all these great games, and again, games like this that are kind of just like a work of art.
Right. That's
that
beautiful.
that I want to play with. I want to play with BFF and all the charms, and I can't wait until Xenolanguage comes out, which is going to be another game from Thorny Games, because you're going to use kind of like a Ouija board type. We'll have like a planchette to move her. Like, I can't wait for that game.
And that's an interesting game, because that's a game about like people who don't speak the same language trying to communicate and all this stuff, which is a super cool idea.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems that's one that, I would be really like, that'll be really different with different groups.
Yeah.
I think that's really all right. Well, we close every episode with the same thing. I sandbagged on you. You don't know about this. The space jam question.
I don't like surprises.
Aliens have invaded the Earth, and they are going to blow everything up unless you run an awesome 4-hour game.
Oh, no.
What are you running, and why?
I would run Apocalypse World Olive Garden. Because
it's fantastic.
It is the only thing I could run with zero prep at this point. And I've never had a game that people didn't enjoy. And what I noticed about that game is I, as a GM, actually had to do very, very little except throw bad restaurant tropes at these people and then say, how will you solve this problem?
We blew up
whatever they did. Yeah, whatever they did, I'd be like, Awesome. Also, I would bring breadsticks to the game.
Well, there you go. The breadsticks. I think that would.
I would win the aliens over with breadsticks.
But would they be unlimited breadsticks?
No, because there's
Yeah.
scarcity in Olive Garden. I take them away in the middle of the game, but they normally get them back.
This is turning into some sort of Swedish LARP with scarcity. And oh man. Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome, and we put it up there. But you can find Karen on Twitter. She's at K12s and Improv for Gamers. Maybe you've heard about it. It's a fine book you could buy and read.
Check it out.
You can get it at improvforgamers.com. And yeah, thank you so much, Karen. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so that's it. Just thank you so much for your likes, your subscribes, your comments. We really appreciate it. Take a moment if you haven't and go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. You can find our past episodes with all sorts of great GMs, future episodes with probably great GMs. I don't know. It's who will come and talk to me. And don't forget, keep the game moving.